Come here for me. You haven't heard? Sarah whispered, pulling her friend closer. Her voice was full of worry. Sade is missing. Nobody has seen her for 2 days. Funmi frowned, looking confused. What do you mean? Missing? Maybe she's just sick, she said, trying to sound calm. But Sarah could tell she didn't believe her own words. Sick? No, Funmi, that's not it. If she was sick, she would have told someone by now, Sarah said, her voice shaking a little. It's been 2 whole days and she hasn't even called. Funmi glanced around, her face showing she was getting worried too. But what could have happened to her? She whispered. I don't know. But the last time anyone saw her was after her tutoring section with Mr. Ade. Sarah said, her heart pounding. Funmi's eyes went wide. Wait, what? She was with Mr. Ade, are you sure? She asked, her voice going even quieter. I thought he only tutored certain girls and Sade is not one of them. I know, and that's what's bothering me, Sarah said, leaning in closer. This doesn't feel right at all. Funmi, something is wrong. Later that day, after classes had finished, Sarah found herself walking near the staff room. Most of the teachers had left, but she heard voices inside. Curious, she stopped and listened. I'm telling you, Ade, this is getting serious. Mrs. Williams, the vice principal, said, Sade's parents are already asking where she is. They are worried. Sarah froze. They are talking about Sade. The thoughts. We have to keep this quiet, Mr. Ade replied calmly. If the parents start making a fuss, it will be a big problem for the school. But what if other people start asking questions? Mrs. Williams sounded nervous. You know how quickly rumors spread. Soon, everyone will know. We'll take care of it, Mr. Ade said, sounding sure of himself. I won't let anyone find out what really happened. Sarah's heart raced. What really happened? What were they hiding? Slowly, Sarah stepped away from the door. Her hands were shaking. She had heard enough to know something bad had happened, and Mr. Ade was part of it. Sade was missing, and it wasn't just a normal absence. Mr. Ade and Mrs. Williams were trying to keep it a secret. But why? What had happened during that tutoring session? Sarah hurried down the hallway, her mind spinning. She had to find out the truth, but deep down, she knew this wouldn't be easy. If Mr. Ade was involved, asking too many questions could be dangerous. As she walked away, she made up her mind she wouldn't stop until she knew what had happened to Sade, no matter what. Sarah couldn't stop thinking about what she overheard. After school, she cornered her friend Funmi, who had always been a big fan of Mr. Ade. Funmi, have you heard anything about Sade's disappearance? Sarah asked cautiously. She didn't want to seem too eager, but she needed answers. Stay away from this, Sarah. I'm serious, Funmi whispered, looking around nervously. It was break time, and the other students were chatting and laughing nearby. But Funmi wasn't her usual self. Sarah noticed how tense she looked. Sarah frowned, leaning closer. Why are you telling me this, Funmi? You always said Mr. Ade was the best teacher in the school. You used to talk about how much you learned from him. I know, Funmi replied, her voice shaky. She couldn't even look Sarah in the eyes, but things are different now. I think it's better if you don't get involved. What do you mean? Sarah asked, confused. Different how? What's going on, Funmi? Funmi's hand trembled slightly as she pulled her back close to her. I think it's better for you if you don't ask too many questions. People who do, they end up in trouble. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. What kind of trouble? She asked, her voice a little louder now. Funmi quickly looked around to make sure no one was listening. Shh! Keep your voice down, she hissed. I can't tell you everything, okay? Just trust me. Stay out of this. Sarah stared at her friend, not believing what she was hearing. Funmi looked scared, really scared. But why? What was she hiding? What did she know that she wasn't telling her? Funmi You know something, don't you? Sarah asked, her voice softer and more intense. Tell me, what's going on with Mr. Ade? Why is everyone acting so weird around him? Funmi bit her lips, still not meeting Sarah's gaze. I can't. I'm sorry, Sarah. I can't say anything more, she whispered. Just promise me you will let this go. Sarah didn't answer. She knew she couldn't promise that. Funmi's warning only made her more curious. What kind of trouble could Mr. Ade be involved in? And why were the girls so nervous and so quiet around him? That night, as Sarah lay in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about Funmi's word. What is going on, she wondered, staring at the ceiling. Why is everyone acting like this is a secret no one is allowed to talk about? Her mind raced through everything she knew. Mr. Ade was supposed to be the best teacher in the school, but now it seemed like there was something dark about him, something that everyone was too afraid to speak of. But why? Sarah felt a knot in her stomach. Funmi was her friend, but she was hiding something important. Sarah couldn't let this go. She needed to find out what was really happening, even if it meant getting into the trouble Funmi had warned her about. The more she thought about it, the more determined she became. Whatever Mr. Ade was hiding, she was going to figure it out. Tola, I need to talk to you. It's serious, Sarah said the next day, pulling her friend aside right after lunch. Her heart was racing. Tola was the only person she could trust with this. Tola looked at Sarah's face and frowned. What's wrong? Why do you look so worried? Sarah took a deep breath. I think something really bad is happening with Mr. Ade, she whispered, her voice low so no one could hear. You know Sade has been missing for 2 days now, and I overheard a conversation between Mr. Ade and Mrs. Williams. They are hiding something. Tola's eyes widened. Wait, slow down, Sarah, she said, crossing her arms. Are you sure you are not just overthinking this? I mean, I know Mr. Ade is strict, but you are saying he's up to something bad. I know it sounds crazy, Sarah admitted, biting her lips. I thought the same thing at first, but Funmi told me to stay out of this. Can't you see what's going on around you? Tola was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking. She rubbed her forehead, then let out a heavy sigh. Okay, let's say something weird is happening. What do we do about it? Sarah felt a surge of relief. At least Tola was listening. I need help, she said. We need to figure out what's happening in these private sessions with Mr. Ade. I don't think they are just ordinary lessons. Will you help me? Tola hesitated, her face showing doubt. Sarah, this could be really dangerous, she said slowly. If Mr. Ade is hiding something, he's not going to let us find out easily. We could get in big trouble. I know, Sarah said, her voice serious, but we can't just ignore it. What if other girls are in danger too? We have to do something. Tola looked at her, then finally nodded. All right, she said, I will help you, but we need to be careful. If Mr. Ade finds out we are snooping around him, we are done for. Sarah smiled, feeling a little better now that she had someone on her side. Thanks, Tola. I knew I could count on you. That afternoon, the two girls stayed after the school, waiting for Mr. Ade to leave his office. They watched him from a distance as he packed his bag and headed out of the building. What do we do now? Tola whispered, glancing around to make sure no one saw them. We follow him, Sarah whispered back, her heart pounding. We need to figure out where he goes after school and what he's doing. Tola looked nervous but nodded. The two girls quietly followed Mr. Ade as he left the school ground. They kept their distance, hiding behind trees and walls whenever he looked back. After a while, Mr. Ade turned down a side street, heading towards a small rundown building. It looked like an old storage unit, far from the main road. What is he doing here? Tola whispered, her voice shaking a little. I don't know, Sarah replied, her eyes wide with curiosity. But we need to find out. They watched as Mr. Ade unlocked the door and stepped inside, closing it behind him. Sarah's stomach twisted with a mix of fear and excitement. We'll come back tomorrow, Sarah said, grabbing Tola's arm. We'll find a way to get inside. Tola nodded, though she still looked nervous. I hope we are not making a mistake, she said softly. This feels dangerous. Sarah swallowed hard. I know, but we can't stop now. We are getting closer to the truth. And so their investigation began. The school was buzzing with whispers and curious looks when Sade finally returned after being gone for 3 days. But something was wrong. She wasn't the same cheerful Sade everyone knew. She moved slowly, her head down, and didn't speak to anyone. It was like the light inside her had gone out. Tola and Sarah watched from the other side of the classroom. Sade took her seat at the back, keeping her eyes fixed on her desk. She didn't even greet her friends. Her shoulders were hunched, and she looked like she wanted to disappear. She's different, Tola whispered, glancing at Sarah. It's like she's afraid of something. Yeah, I noticed, Sarah replied, her voice low. She's not saying anything about where she was or what happened. It's like she's too scared to talk. During the break, Sarah decided to approach Sade. She walked over to her cautiously, trying not to seem too pushy. Hey, Sade, Sarah said softly, sitting down next to her. We've all been so worried about you. Are you okay? Sade lifted her head slightly, just enough to meet Sarah's eyes for a brief moment. Her eyes were dull, not like they used to be. I'm fine, she said quietly, her voice so low that Sarah had to lean in to hear her. You were gone for a few days, Sarah continued, keeping her voice gentle. Where were you? What happened to you? Sade's hand tightened around the edges of her book, her fingers trembling. She shook her head slowly. I don't want to talk about it, she whispered, her voice shaky. Sarah felt her heart sink. She had to know more, but she didn't want to push too hard. Was this something to do with Mr. Ade? She asked, lowering her voice even more, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. As soon as Sarah mentioned Mr. Ade's name, Sade's whole body stiffened. Her eyes widened, and for a split second, Sarah saw fear flash across her eyes. But just as quickly, Sade looked away, her shoulders hunching even more. Leave me alone, Sade mumbled, her voice barely audible. Without another word, she stood up quickly, clutching her books to her chest, and hurried out of the classroom. Sarah watched her go, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never seen Sade like this before. Whatever had happened to her, it had shaken her to the core. Tola came up beside Sarah, her eyes wide with concern. What did she say? She asked, watching Sade rush down the hall. She didn't say much, Sarah replied, her stomach twisting with worry. But I asked her if it had something to do with Mr. Ade, and she looked terrified. She's definitely hiding something. Tola bit her lip, looking nervous. What do you think happened to her? I don't know, Sarah said softly, her mind racing. But whatever it was really bad. Really, really bad. Sade's fear confirmed what Sarah had been suspecting all along. Mr. Ade wasn't just giving private lessons. Something much darker was going on, and Sade was too scared to talk about it. As she watched Sade disappear down the hallway, Sarah made up her mind. She had to dig deeper, no matter how dangerous it was. Word spread quickly through the school that Sarah had been asking too many questions about Sade and Mr. Ade. At first, the whispers were small, just a few students talking behind her back. But soon, it felt like everyone was talking about her. She's the one causing all the drama, someone muttered as Sarah passed by in the hallway. Yeah, she's been stirring things up for weeks, another student replied, their voice full of judgment. Sarah tried to ignore it, but the whispers followed her everywhere. She could feel their eyes on her, watching her, like she was the troublemaker. It wasn't just the students either. Even some of the teachers started giving her strange looks, as if they were wondering what she was up to. One afternoon, Mrs. Williams called Sarah to stay back after class. Sarah's heart sank. She could tell by the look on Mrs. Williams' face that it wasn't going to be a good conversation. Sarah, Mrs. Williams said, her voice tight. You need to stop this. Sarah blinked in surprise. Stop what, ma? She asked, though she already knew what Mrs. Williams meant. Mrs. Williams crossed her arms, her expression stern. You know what I'm talking about. All these questions you are asking is none of your business. Sarah's chest tightened with frustration. But Mrs. Williams, something is wrong. Sade hasn't been the same since she came back, and nobody is talking about it. And what about Mr. Ade? He's enough, Mrs. Williams snapped, cutting her off. Her voice was sharp, like a slap in the face. You are creating problems where there aren't any. You need to let this go. Sarah felt anger bubbling inside her. But I can't just pretend like nothing is happening. Sade is scared, and if you keep this up, there will be consequences. Mrs. Williams interrupted, her voice low and full of warning. This is your last warning, Sarah. Sarah clenched her fist, feeling the weight of Mrs. Williams' words. It was clear that she wasn't going to get any help from the teachers. They were either too afraid or too loyal to Mr. Ade to do anything. Without another word, Sarah grabbed her bag and stormed out of the classroom. Her heart was pounding, her mind racing. She knew what was happening. Mr. Ade was behind this. He was turning everyone against her, making her look like the bad guy so that nobody would believe her. As she walked down the hall, she overheard more whispers from the students. She's going to get in big trouble if she keeps this up, one girl said. Yeah, Mr. Ade is a respected teacher. She's making a huge mistake, another voice replied. Sarah's stomach twisted, but she couldn't let their words get to her. She wasn't the one causing problem. She was trying to help. She was trying to find the truth. But now, it felt like she was fighting this battle alone. The school was turning against her, one by one. The rumors, the judgments, the threats from the teachers, it was all Mr. Ade's doing. He wanted to silence her, to make her too scared to keep digging. But Sarah wasn't going to stop. She couldn't stop, even if everyone turned their backs on her. She knew she was right. Something terrible was happening, and she had to find out what it was. As she walked out of the school building, Sarah made a promise to herself. She will find out the truth no matter what it took. The tension at the school finally reached a breaking point when another student vanished. This time, it wasn't just quiet whispers in the hallway or rumors passed around in class. This time, the story exploded onto the news. The media swarmed the school, demanding answers from the principal, from the teachers, from anyone who would talk. Cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions outside the school gate. It felt like the whole world was watching. Inside the school, the students were panicking. Parents were calling, asking where their children were. But even with all the chaos, Mr. Ade remained calm. He walked through the halls like nothing had changed, his usual smooth smile on his face. It was like he was untouchable. Why isn't he worried? Sarah muttered to Tola one afternoon as they watched the frenzy from the safety of the classroom. Another student had gone missing, and he acted like nothing happened. Tola shook her head. He's good at hiding it, but you can tell people are starting to question him. They can't ignore it anymore. Sarah glanced at the other student, some still looking at Mr. Ade with same admiration, but others were starting to whisper behind his back. Sarah could feel the cracks forming. People were finally beginning to see that something was wrong. This is it, Tola said, her voice serious. If we are going to stop him, we need to do it now before more girls disappear. Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of Tola's word. But how do we do that? He's got everyone fooled. The teachers, the students, even the parents, they all think he's perfect. Tola's eyes were full of determination. We expose him. We just need the right evidence, something nobody can ignore. Sarah took a deep breath. We'll find it, she said firmly. We have to. But deep down, Sarah knew that finding evidence wasn't going to be easy. Mr. Ade was smart. He had been covering his track for a long time, but she couldn't back down now. Too much was at stake. Sarah and Tola knew they couldn't do this alone. They needed more people on their side. So they started reaching out to the girls who had been affected by Mr. Ade the most. It wasn't easy. Some of the girls were too scared to talk, afraid of what might happen if they speak out. But others were ready to fight back. They had been waiting for someone to step up and lead them. We can't keep quiet anymore, one of the girls, Kemi, said during their first meeting. We have to stand up for ourselves. The small group began meeting in secret, planning how they could expose Mr. Ade. They talked about collecting stories, gathering any proof they could find, and sharing what they knew with the right people. But things didn't go as smoothly as Sarah and Tola had hoped for. Not everyone was on the same page. One of the girls, Layo, had been acting strange for days. She stopped coming to the meeting, making excuses about being busy or needing to study. At first, Sarah didn't think much of it, but then she noticed Layo avoiding eye contact and staying far away from the group whenever Mr. Ade was nearby. Something didn't feel right. One afternoon, Sarah followed Layo after school, and what she saw made her heart sink. Layo was talking to Mr. Ade, her face pale and her body tense. Sarah couldn't hear what they were saying, but she didn't need to. She knew exactly what was happening. Layo had betrayed them. That evening, Sarah told the group what she had seen. The girls looked at each other in shock, some of them gasping in disbelief. He must have gotten to her, Sarah said bitterly, her hands clenched into fists. She's been feeding him information. Now, our whole plan is at risk. The girls sat in silence for a moment, fear creeping into their eyes. One of the younger girls, Amina, finally spoke up. What do we do now? If Mr. Ade knows everything, we all are in danger. Sarah took a deep breath, pushing down the frustration and fear bubbling inside her. She had to stay strong for the group. We keep going, she said firmly. We can't let this stop us. But how? He knows what we are planning now, Kemi said, her voice shaky. We just have to be smarter, Sarah replied. We need to change our plan. We can't meet like this anymore. We need to find a new way to gather proof. Tola nodded beside her, backing Sarah up. We can do this, but we have to be more careful from now on. No one else can know what we are doing. The girls looked at each other, a new sense of determination in their eyes. They were scared, but they weren't going to give up. They couldn't. We'll make sure he doesn't get away with this, Sarah said, her voice steady, no matter what. After Laya's betrayal, Sarah knew she had to be more careful. Mr. Ade was getting closer to discovering their plan, and she couldn't take any chances. She decided to disappear for a few days, staying with a relative in another town, where she figured out her next move. It wasn't easy. Sarah felt like she was constantly looking over her shoulders, worried that someone would find out where she was. But she knew it was the only way to stay safe while she gathered more evidence. During those days away, Sarah worked hard contacting people who could help her. She managed to collect enough proof to expose Mr. Ade's operation. She found documents, messages, and even a recording that showed how deep his control went. It was shocking, but it was exactly what she needed to take him down. I've got it, Sarah said quietly when she called Tola from her relative's house. I've got the proof we need. Tola sounded relieved on the other end of the line. Are you coming back? Yes, Sarah replied, but I'm coming back quietly. We can't let Mr. Ade know I'm back until we are ready to confront him. Tola agreed. When Sarah finally came back to school, she did so quietly, slipping in unnoticed. She felt the weight of the evidence she carried, knowing that soon everything would be out in the open. As she walked through the school hall, Sarah could feel the tension in the air. The students were still talking about the missing girls, and Mr. Ade still walked around as if nothing could touch him. But Sarah knew his time was running out. She was ready to end this once and for all. You've been expelled, Sarah's mother said softly, holding the letter in her trembling hands. Her voice cracked with disappointment. Sarah's heart sank, her throat tightening as she looked at her parents' sad, confused faces. But it's all lies, Mom, her voice shaking. You have to believe me. I'm telling the truth. Mr. Ade is doing something terrible, and no one wants to see it. Her father sighed deeply, rubbing his forehead. Sarah, this has gone too far. You've upset the whole school, and now you've been expelled. Maybe it's time to step back and let this go. Step back? Sarah repeated, disbelief and anger bubbling inside her. How could her own parents not see what was happening? You think I should give up? That's what Mr. Ade wants. He's turning everyone against me. So I will stop, but I won't. Her mother gently placed the letter down on the table, her eyes full of worry. "We just don't want you to get hurt, Sarah. This fight is too dangerous." Sarah clenched her fist tightly. She felt completely betrayed, not just by the school, but by her parents too. No one believed her. No one was on her side anymore. But she wasn't going to give up. Not now. Expelled or not, Sarah said, her voice steady with determination, "I'm going to expose him. I won't stop until everyone knows the truth." Later that evening, Sarah met up with Tola. They sat on a bench in the park, the school breeze making the silence between them feel heavier. "We have enough evidence now," Tola said, her voice quiet but firm. "We just need to find the right moment." Sarah nodded, staring out into the dark night. "We'll catch him red-handed. That's the only way people will believe us." The moment they had been waiting for had finally arrived. Sarah and Tola had set up their plan carefully. Knowing this was their last chance to stop Mr. Sade, they had discovered that Mr. Sade was meeting with one of his accomplices, someone deeply involved in his illegal activities. If they could catch him in the act, there would be no more room for doubt. Sarah's heart raced as she hid in the shadows outside the secluded room where the meeting was taking place. Tola, hiding nearby with a camera, gave her a quick signal. It was time. The door creaked open and Sarah peeked inside. Mr. Sade walked calmly into the room, his usual confident smile on his face. Sarah held her breath as she waited, and then another figure entered the room. Sarah's eyes widened in shock. It was Mrs. Williams, the vice principal. "I told you the girls will keep quiet," Mrs. Williams said, her voice cold and certain. "But we have to be careful. That Sarah girl has been snooping around. She's causing too much trouble." Mr. Sade chuckled, his laugh low and chilling. "Don't worry about her. She's been expelled. No one believes her anymore. She's out of the picture." Sarah's hand shook as she recorded everything with her phone. Her heart was pounding, but she knew this was it. This was the proof they needed. Just then, the door burst open. Tola had called the police earlier, and now they stormed in, catching Mr. Sade and Mrs. Williams in the middle of their conversation. "It's over, Mr. Sade," Sarah said, stepping out of the shadows. "Everyone will know the truth now." For the first time, Mr. Sade's calm, confident demeanor disappeared. He glared at Sarah with pure hatred, but she didn't care. It didn't matter anymore. The truth was out now, and he was finally caught. The days that followed were full of chaos. The news of Mr. Sade's arrest spread like wildfire, and when people found out that Mrs. Williams had been involved too, the entire school was thrown into shock. The media was everywhere, reporters crowding outside the school gate, asking questions and demanding answers. Sarah watched from a distance, her heart heavy with everything that had happened. The school she once trusted had been hiding such dark secrets, and now it was all unraveling. She sat in the principal's office with her parents. The new acting principal had called them in to talk about Sarah's expulsion. "You've done something very brave, Sarah," the acting principal said, his voice full of respect. "You've uncovered something terrible, and because of you, this school will never be the same." Sarah's parents looked at her, their eyes filled with pride and relief. "We are so proud of you," her mother whispered, tears in her eyes. "We should have believed you sooner." Later, as Sarah walked through the now quiet hallway of the school, she thought about everything that had happened. She had been offered the chance to transfer to another school, to leave this place and start afresh. But as she stood at the entrance of the school, she made her decision. "No," she said to herself, her voice steady. "I'm not leaving. This school needs change, and I'm going to be part of it." Sarah knew there were still work to be done. The school needed to rebuild, to make sure no other student ever went through what she and the others had. She was determined to stay and help fix what had been broken. But as she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that not everything had been uncovered. There was still something lurking in the shadows. Had all Mr. Sade's accomplices been caught? Or were there more secrets hiding in the dark corners of the school? Sarah glanced over her shoulder at the building. A small smile touched at her lips. She wasn't done yet. There were still questions that needed answers. And she was going to find them. Do you think Sarah has uncovered all the secrets, or is there more dangers lurking in the shadows? What would you do if you were in Sarah's shoe? Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next part of this thrilling story. Leave a comment with your thoughts below. We can't wait to hear what you think. Till I see you again in my next story. Goodbye.